Hello. In this lesson, we're going to review the entire semester. So I'm going to put the title of the review. Starting from the first week, right? We're going to go by week to see what we have covered and what is expected of you to know. And first of all, at the beginning, we introduced mathematical principles. We introduced mathematical principles, and there are 6 mathematical principles right here, okay? And we have lessons to cover: mathematical principles, number system, the simple grammar of mathematics. So we talk about there are only 2 kinds of sentences in mathematics. One is a statement, the other one is if statement. We study the truth table, and we talk about functions. So from there, we start talking about functions. We talk about familiar functions. And we promise you that the theme of this semester is function. Okay, so the entire semester is about functions. Okay, so I should use plural. We talk about many different functions. So besides mathematical principles, because we use mathematical principles all the time, number systems, which is a basic concept, right? And simple grammar mathematics and the truth table. Among all of these, right? Among all of these are the things we're going to use throughout the semester. Okay? So these are the important concept we use throughout the semesters. And then we have introduction to functions, right? In the introduction to functions, we have introduced these concepts, right? Function definition, right? And then we talk about one-to-one function. Well, what is one-to-one function? Right? And what is not one-to-one function? Right? So that's these concepts we go over. Okay. And after that, we talk about increasing function, and decreasing function. These important concepts. Okay, increasing function, decreasing function, and even function, odd function, or neither, right? Neither. So 3 categories of functions. So at the beginning of semester, we introduced these concepts, and then we talk about specific functions. Okay, on the specific functions, we actually talk about, we're gonna make a table of functions. Okay, these table of functions, you will see that the first group of function we talk about are constant functions. Okay, so for constant functions, we talk about domain, range, and graph. Domain, range, and graph, right? So at the function definition, of course, we have introduced domain and range. So all of these concepts will be talked about for all of the functions we studied in this semester. So constant functions, functions such as the first group of function we talk about, right? Alpha of x equals to 1/x, right? And the next function we talk about is, it may not be in that order, say x squared, right? And the function which is square root of x, and function, all these different rules all these different rules. We talk about their domain range graph, right? And the next function, I believe, is x raised to the power 3. It's a function you're going to use in the future. Okay, and one more function, of course, the absolute value function. This is the first group of function we talked about. Okay, what about them? What about them? About their domain range, right? One-to-one function or not, increasing function, decreasing function, even function, odd function. So in the first week, we have talked about these concepts, okay? Along the way, we spend quite a lot of time on absolute value functions. And we pointed out that this function is very, very important, very, very important, okay? So second week, we talked about, we continue to talk about functions, right? One-to-one function, how to find inverse function, if it is inverse function, if it is one-to-one function, composition of functions, and so on and so forth. And then we talk about exponential functions and logarithm functions. So that in the next 2 weeks, right, we talk about exponential function and logarithm functions in week 2 and week 3. So continue with more functions. We have exponential functions, right? F of x equals to 2 to the power x, and its inverse function, which is, they're paired, log base 2x, and we graphed all of these functions. We graphed all of these functions one by one, right? And log base 3 functions. So for base 3, we did the same thing. Okay, 3 to the power x and log base 3x and a natural log functions, e to the power x and the ln x. Okay, and one of the, we talk about this, but we didn't do much as in details, but it's a common log functions and 10 to the power x. So the next 8 functions are addressed by the time we finish up week number 3. And so all of these concepts are repetitively studied for these functions, okay? And about their domain and range. Why domain is so, why range is so, how the points are plotted, and so on and so forth. And next, we get to our trig functions. We spend a lot of time on our trig functions, and these functions are, right, sine, okay, sine, cosine, tangent, and cotangent. And arc sine, arc cosine, arc tan, arc cotangent functions. Okay, we talk about in great details trigonometry as a course. What is the centerpiece of trigonometry, right? We talk about ARD, right? How angles are measured, how reference angles defined, how reference angles used. So in all of these studies, we see that our questions is either A to D, right? Or D to A. ARD from D to A. Either way. So all the questions you're going to encounter in trigonometry, they're either A to D or D to A. Okay, so the kind of arrow doesn't really matter. I can make them the same type of arrow if you want, right? And we spend weeks on these topics. We spend weeks on these topics from week number 3 all the way to I think right before midterm exam. Okay, all kinds of composition, right? So even after week, after week number 8, we talk about, trig functions again, but before, from week 3 to week 7, we talk about these trig functions. Why domain is so, range is so, and a domain range for all of these functions. So that's what we have talked about in this semester on composition, right? So it took us from week 3 to week 7. Okay, week number 8, in week number 8, that's our midterm, and we have some summaries, and we still work on identities, composition of trig functions. So we have done a lot of work, okay, up to week number 8. So it's important for you to review midterm exam and see those questions and how you can, solve those questions. And after week 8, we studied, how to solve from D to A, right? How to solve trig equations, which is from D to A. Okay, and then we go back to talk about exponential and trig functions and trig equations, which are the if statements, right? So after the midterm, we spend a lot of time on the if statement. Before midterm, we talk about the statements, expressions, and so on and so forth. So exponential it was touched again, and absolute value equations, inequalities are touched again. So a lot of the important topics, we've studied them more than once, okay, twice. And we talk about some, quadratic functions and their applications in trig and complex trig equations, complex exponential equations, and complex logarithm equations, right? So all the way until week number 14, right? So all these time up to week number 14, we studied statement, right? For these functions, the first group of 8, the second group, and the third group. Focus on these functions and their complicated variations. And then we talk about parametric in 2 lectures. And in last week, we did mathematical induction in 2 lessons. Piecewise functions is particularly important. Okay, piecewise functions. You are going to use them immediately. Okay, arithmetic sequence you're going to use in the next semester. Okay, calculus 1, and geometric sequence you're going to use in calculus 2. All right, so all 15 weeks of work, of course, is not the end of it. Most importantly, we have seen so many examples, and you have done so many quizzes. In fact, you've done 32 quizzes. You've done 32 quizzes, and all will be accounted for a part of your study, as part of your study. And the final exam, of course, is a comprehensive. We're going to try to cover all the materials included. In this review session, I wish it is more interactive, but I just have to talk to, pretending that you are there. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send it my way. Your final exam will be available on the 7th and close on the 9th. And as always, you have 3 attempts, and I wish the best for your effort. Okay, so we really have studied all of these functions. The last kind, of course, piecewise functions. Okay, and the compositions of functions. So this semester, indeed is, as I promised in the beginning of semester, the theme is function. Okay, it has been the theme that in my mind throughout the semester, throughout the semester. And composition of functions, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing functions. So we see a variety of functions. And you're going to take these functions right into your calculus class. Okay, you can take these functions right into your calculus class. So when you review, make sure that you may have to go back to watch some of those recordings again in order to get a, to review those concepts, right? The if statement in the form of equation, inequality, the variety of different methods I have exposed you guys to. I hope it will be very useful for you because I'm covering these materials with the mindset that all these are going to be useful for your future courses, Okay. So right now I'm going to just put out this review recording out there for you. And if you have any questions, send it my way. I can make some extra recordings for you, or come to my office hours and, just to feel free to ask any questions or ask questions asynchronously in the inbox or pronto. Okay, so all of these functions we have studied this entire semester. Okay. Domain range, that's big topics, right? The variety of ways of expressing domains and range, and how to say it, etc., etc. Okay, so let this lesson. I mean, this lesson is not going to be very long, in the sense that I'm just opening. It is opening the disc. Opening to your questions. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. And in the last week, I'll be posting some useful stuff for your calculus studies, okay, for your calculus class. And so I will still be giving you some lectures, and I will also lecture on polar. You may not have time to watch it, and it will not be covered on the exam, but polar is certainly going to be one of the topics. And the other important recordings I'll be making is that looking ahead to your calculus class, what kind of algebraic skill you should be prepared for in order to survive those classes that come in your way. Okay, so this review session, I think that's it. I don't know how much more details I should get into until I receive any report, any response from you, so I can help you better. Okay, so please, respond to my questions, respond to my, have a long conversation with me and put question out there, so I will make more recordings for you. Okay. So that's it for this lesson, which is a brief review. It cannot be very in great details unless you ask me to, because we have covered all of those details in the semester already. So I guess I will say goodbye now, and I'll be making other recordings for you. Okay. Thank you for watching.